DSP problems, I feel bad for your son. I've got 99 problems, but a block ain't one. Hit me. So, this week on the Line 6 Podgo Facebook group, there's been a couple of things going on. So first of all, there was a Podgo update, and in that there were some new things that got brought across: the orange rock reverb, the Euclidean delay, the dynamic hall, the hot springs reverb, some cool things like that. But also, somewhere in the phrase, I think Choptones uploaded a preset, and they had done some tinkering with the JSON. So JSON is like a coding language, I think, and also he was Freddie's rival, wasn't he? But basically, they kind of fudged their preset so that you could free up some blocks and stuff, and basically this was discovered and people have been messing around with it, and you can essentially, if you want to, jailbreak your device. First of all, I should probably say this is not something that Line 6 necessarily recommend, but they're not trying to stop it either if you want to do it. So you could potentially change that effects loop, which is fixed in there. You could get rid of that, and you can change the wah pedal and the volume pedal. This has been received in a few different ways, so I think some people have thought there's a bit of conspiracy going on, therefore, so it can't be that there's DSP limitations in the Podgo. If we can free up these blocks and we could do whatever we want with them, why can't we have a fifth added block? And then I think also people have sort of backed down from that a little bit and said, I've actually tried this a bit and I hit the DSP limitations before I thought I might. So when the Podgo was initially released, I think Line 6 were quite upfront about what it was, what it wasn't, and they were quite upfront about saying there's going to be these 4 blocks that you can choose to be what you want, and you can move them to be anywhere in the signal chain, which is already kind of pretty powerful compared to some other stuff. The reason for there being 4 is because if you add that 5th one, then I think quite often you'd be seeing those greyed out models, and people already say, or we see quite commonly, I do when I go on the group, I'm sure Line 6 get it all the time, what do these greyed out blocks mean? Or why can't I use these new blocks? All of these sorts of questions. And I think the answer is that basically they just didn't want to have to field those sorts of questions all the time. Now, if you were to use, I don't know, the megaphone drive a lot, or if you were to get rid of the amp and the cab, these kind of things, then there are use cases, I think, where you could use all 10 blocks and not hit that DSP limit. And so maybe there's an argument that Line 6 should or could provide that capability. But I think there's also an equally valid argument, and that they've already put it across, they don't necessarily want you as the user of a Podgo to be hitting those grey DSP limitations all the time, bearing in mind that whatever the device has in there processing wise is not going to change, and I think that makes perfectly valid sense. So things that I would like to see change from the Line 6 Podgo, maybe, so I think it'd be about 3% is tied up in the wah pedal DSP wise, and I think about 3% is tied up in the EQ, and maybe about 3% in the effects loop. So there's maybe like 9% at a push of DSP that you could use somewhere else if you got rid of those blocks. So it's not like a massive thing, so that could be maybe another drive pedal, but not much. However, if I never use a wah pedal in a Podgo, then to be honest, that block doesn't really need to be there. So I kind of would like that flexibility if given the choice. If someone said to me, well, we could free up this so you can put whatever you like, wherever you like, subject to DSP limitations, that would be cool. Or equally, if people are using this just an effects board, you know, you could get rid of the amp and the cab if you want to. You kind of jailbreak your device in that way. I think that would be cool. And on the HX effects, you almost never run out of DSP because the amp and the cab block can take up to between 30 and 50% of your processing power anyway, so that could be like a cool thing that you could do. So you say to me, you can completely free up your Podgo and we can make it so you can get rid of the amp block, the cab block if you want, get rid of the wah and the volume if you want. That sounds like it could be quite an easy win and not necessarily change the user experience too much. Maybe you make it a global setting. The other big change that I'd quite like to see, and I've talked about it quite a few times, is about the amp out. Now at the moment, the way that works is it's either your main outs go out via the amp out, or you can go pre-cab, pre-IR. Now I think that should also be pre-amp as an option, so that you don't send out the amp model to the front of your amp. That's something that I'd like to see. I've mentioned it before, but stacking an amp model in front of your amp doesn't always sound great, or even into the back of your amp. The preamp models sound better, but they don't sound great out through the front of house necessarily. So I'd like that flexibility, so maybe there'd be a third setting in the amp out source, which would be pre-amp, then you'd have pre-cab IR, and then main out as your three options. For me, that would be a big win. Aside from that, I can't really see anything that the Podgo doesn't do that I really need it to do for the £380 or whatever I paid for it. It's a great device. I can understand also why they don't bring across things like the Cosmos Echo or the Tone Sovereign, these things that are possibly not gonna, you wouldn't be able to even use one block with some amp and cab combinations. So I think that's basically the gist of things, that they don't want you to come across those limitations too often. So yeah, what would you want for the Podgo? Have you been trying these kind of jailbreaks? Have Line 6 lied to you all along? No. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to. I thought it was just worth talking about some of that Podgo news. And I'll go back to some playing now. Cheers.